Hello, friends. There is a weight that every soul knows. It is the strain in your muscles from holding on too tight. Picture yourself hanging from a rope, suspended over a vast, silent canyon. Your hands are raw, your knuckles white. Below you is the unknown, a sea of mist and shadow. Your every instinct, every fiber of your being, screams at you to hold on, to grip tighter, because letting go. We believe our grip is the only thing keeping us from plunging into chaos. We manage our schedules, our relationships, our finances, our futures, all with the desperate strength of someone dangling over an abyss. And we are so tired. The ache in our soul is the echo of the ache in our hands. But what if I told you the story has been misunderstood? What if the terror is not in the fall, but in the hanging on? What if letting go is not about falling into an abyss, but about being caught by the one who made the canyon, the rope, and you? Today, we explore this great paradox. We will walk through 5 territories of our lives that we guard with fierce control, 5 fortresses where we have locked ourselves inside, and we will learn the ancient secret of surrender, the art of opening the hand and finding not an empty palm, but a hand held in return. We build 5-year plans, secure retirement funds, and track our progress with anxious precision. We chart the stars to predict our path, but we do so with the flickering light of a candle, trying to illuminate a universe. The future is the great unknown sea, and we are desperate to map its every current and reef before we set sail. This obsession, this need to control what is not yet, is the source of our deepest anxieties. There was a man who lived under a sky so vast and empty, it would swallow a man's certainty whole. His name was Abram, later called Abraham. He was a man of substance, a man with a place. He had a home, a lineage, a past that was known and a future that was, by all accounts, predictable. He would grow old, he would prosper, and he would be buried with his fathers. It was a life of control, of manageable expectation. It said, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." Notice the terrifying vagueness of the command. It was not, "Go to the land 200 miles northeast," the one with the river and the fertile plains. It was simply, "Go to the land I will show you." It was an invitation to walk into a fog. God was not handing Abraham a map. He was asking Abraham to imagine the conversations, the whispered doubts in the dark of his tent. What are we doing? Where are we going? Every sunrise revealed a horizon that was no more familiar than the one before. The anxiety must have been a physical presence, a shadow that walked beside him. He had surrendered his location, his direction, his retirement plan. He was a wanderer, a man whose only certainty was the promise that had unmoored him from all up. Abraham was old. His wife, Sarah, was barren. This was not just a promise of a future. It was a promise that defied every law of nature he knew. It was a promise that required him not just to surrender his plans, but to surrender his understanding of reality itself. He was being asked to trust that the one who made the stars could also bring life from a barren womb. For years he walked under this promise. The temptation to take control, to help God, was immense. And he did. He and Sarah devised a plan, a logical, culturally acceptable plan. Hagar, the servant, would bear him a son. Ishmael was born. This was the fruit of control. This was the result of taking the divine promise and trying to fulfill it with human strategy. It brought not peace, but strife, jealousy. True surrender is not passive. It is an active moment choice to trust the guide even when the map is blank. It is the discipline of keeping your eyes on the promiser, not the problem. Finally, after decades of waiting, of wandering, of failing and getting back up, Isaac was born. The child of the promise, the impossible laughter that filled the tent of a 90-year-old woman. The future had arrived. And it is here, at the peak of his certainty, that God asks for the ultimate surrender. The voice came again, testing the very foundation of his faith. "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering." This is the point where the modern mind recoils. It seems cruel, nonsensical. But to understand, he was the one thing Abraham could now hold on to, the one piece of the puzzle that was finally in place. And God was asking him to put it back on the table, to surrender the answer itself. The 3-day journey to the mountain is one of the most silent and profound journeys in all of Scripture. What was Abraham thinking? He was not a man devoid of feeling. His heart must have been shattering with every step. Yet he believed somehow that even if he went through with this terrible act, God would bring his son back. He reasoned, as the book of Hebrews tells us, that God could raise the dead. He had surrendered his own understanding and had come to a place of such radical trust that he believed God would be faithful to the promise, even if it meant shattering the very vessel of that promise and creating it anew. When Isaac asked, "Where is?" he was letting go of the final piece of control, the provision. He lifted the knife, his hand was stayed, and there, in the thicket, was a ram God had provided. The test was not about God needing a sacrifice, it was about Abraham needing to know, deep in his bones, that his future was not in his son, not in the promise itself, but in the God who gives the promise. He had to learn that God was not just the starting point of his journey. It is about understanding that your life is a story being written by a master author, and your anxiety comes from trying to snatch the pen and write your own ending. To let go of the future is to say, God, you are a better author than I am. Your story is grander than mine. I will trust you with the next chapter, even if the page is blank. It is to trade the exhausting burden of being the architect of your own life for the peace of living in a house built by God. The second fortress is built behind us. It is the past. If the future is a source of anxiety, the past is a source of shame and regret. It is a landscape of ghosts, of words we wish we hadn't said, of actions we wish we could undo. We are haunted by our former selves. We drag our history behind us like a bag of heavy stones, and the weight of it slows our every step toward the future. We believe we are defined by what we have. We hide it, we justify it, we spin it, we suppress it, but the ghost remains because the one thing we cannot do is let it go. There was a man who was the chief architect of his own haunted past. His name was Saul of Tarsus. He was a man of intense conviction, of brilliant intellect, and of brutal certainty. He believed he was serving God, but his service was written in the blood of others. He was a hunter of men and women. His past was not a collection of minor missteps. It was a monument to violence and persecution. He was, by any reasonable standard, irredeemable. He was on a road to Damascus, breathing out murderous threats, his past fueling his present, propelling him toward more of the same. He was in perfect control of his mission. He knew who he was and what he had to do. And then, a light from heaven, brighter than the noon. It was an interruption so absolute it brought his entire world to a halt. In the darkness of his own blindness, he heard a voice. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And Saul, the hunter, the inquisitor, asked the most important question of his life. "Who are you, Lord?" the voice replied. "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting." In that moment, Saul's past did not just catch. The very one he had been trying to destroy was the one showing him mercy. His entire life, his entire identity was built on a lie, and the truth had just burned it to the ground. For 3 days, he was blind. He did not eat or drink. This was not just a recovery, it was a tomb. Saul of Tarsus. The man defined by his past was dying. He was being emptied of his pride, his certainty, his self-made right. When the disciple Ananias came to him, hesitant to approach such a dangerous man, God told him something revolutionary. "This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel." God did not say, "This man, despite his past, will be my instrument." He saw the past not as a disqualification, but as a preparation. The scales fell from Saul's eyes. He could see again. God did not give him amnesia. Instead, God redeemed his past. Paul's knowledge of the scriptures, once a weapon, became a tool for revelation. His zeal, once a fire for destruction, became a fire for the gospel. His own story of being the chief of sinners became his most powerful testimony to the boundless nature of God's grace. He could speak of forgiveness with such authority because he had received it so profound. He carried it with him, not as a bag of stones, but as a constant reminder of the grace that had saved him. He said, "Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on." This forgetting is not a failure of memory. It is a refusal to be defined by what is behind. It is the conscious decision to unhitch the weight of yesterday from the potential of today. It is letting go of the control of our own. When we surrender our past to Him, He doesn't erase those chapters, He redeems them. He weaves them into the larger story in a way that reveals His glory. The shame becomes a backdrop for grace. The failure becomes the foundation for a testimony. Think of Peter. After boasting that he would never desert Jesus, he denies him 3 times with curses. The crow of the rooster is the soundtrack to his utter failure. The look from he is the one who failed. After the resurrection, Jesus finds Peter on the shore by a charcoal fire, hauntingly similar to the one where he had denied him. He does not berate him. He does not shame him. He asks him a simple question 3 times. Do you love me? With each affirmation, Jesus restores him. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep, feed my sheep. He doesn't say. He takes Peter's greatest failure and makes it the place of his new commissioning. To surrender your past is to bring your ghosts into the light. It is to walk back to the charcoal fire of your greatest shame and find Jesus waiting for you, not with condemnation, but with a question and a commission. It is to stop hiding from what you have done and to stand in the truth that what Christ has done is infinitely more powerful. It is to let go of the futile attempt. The chains of your past are only as strong as your belief in them. When you surrender them to God, you find they were never made of iron but of smoke, and in the light of His grace they simply beautifully disappear. The third fortress is complex and crowded. It is the realm of our relationships. Here our desire for control becomes tangled and intimate. We yearn to manage the feelings, choices, and even the destinies of those we love. But beneath it all is the subtle belief that we know what is best, that our plan is the right one. We become anxious architects of other people's lives. We want to fix our spouses, guide our children onto the right path, change our friends' minds. This desire to control others is a heavy burden, for we were never meant to carry the weight of another's soul. It creates expectation, which leads to disappointment. And the story of a family torn apart by jealousy and control serves as a powerful testament to the freedom found in surrendering our relationships. Jacob had 12 sons, but his love was poorly distributed. He favored one, Joseph, above all others. He gave him a coat of many colors, a visible symbol of his preference. This act of control, of elevating one son, planted seeds of bitterness. Joseph's brothers, consumed by their own sense of being devalued and controlled by their father's favoritism, decided to take control themselves. They would eliminate the source of their pain. They threw Joseph into a pit and sold him into slavery, tearing the coat, dipping it in blood, and presenting their father with the evidence of their lie. It was a cascade of control, each act of manipulation leading to a greater tragedy. For his only option was surrender. He could not control his captors, his status, or his future. All he could control was his response to his circumstances, his integrity, his trust in a God who had not abandoned him in the pit. Through betrayal, false accusation, and imprisonment, Joseph held on to his faith. He did not grow bitter. He did not plot revenge. He surrendered his situation to God day after day. Meanwhile, his brothers and father lived in a prison of their own making, a prison of guilt, grief, and deception. A famine drove the brothers to Egypt to unwittingly bow before the brother they had sold. Here, the story reaches its dramatic fulcrum. Joseph now holds all the power. He is in complete control. He can exact his revenge. He can destroy them as they destroyed him. For a time, he plays with this control. Will the cycle of control and revenge continue? Will he use his power to inflict the same pain he received? The suspense builds until he can bear it no longer. He sends everyone out of the room and he weeps. It is the sound of years of surrendered pain being released. And then he speaks the words that break the cycle forever. I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves. He surrenders his right to vengeance. He surrenders his role as the victim. But he goes even further. He surrenders his entire interpretation of the events. He reframes the past not through the lens of their malice, but through the lens of God's sovereignty. It was not you who sent me here, but God. He sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, Joseph let go of controlling the narrative of his own suffering. He saw that while his brothers were acting out of their own sinful desire for control, a greater hand was at work, weaving their evil into a tapestry of redemption for the entire family. He did not absolve them of their guilt, but he released them from his judgment. He placed them and his own pain into the hands of God, Surrendering our relationships means we stop trying to be it means we pray for them, we support them, but we release the outcome of their lives to God. It means forgiving those who have hurt us, not because they deserve it, but because we deserve to be free from the poison of bitterness. It means letting go of our own narrative of victimhood and asking God to show us his larger story. It is the hardest work because it feels like giving up, but it is not giving up on them. It is giving them up to God. It is trading the exhausting role of a puppeteer for the peaceful role of a fellow actor in a divine play we cannot fully comprehend. And in that release, we find a new kind of love, a love that is not dependent on performance or outcome, a love that mirrors the free, unconditional love of God himself. If this journey of letting go resonates with you, if you feel the weight lifting even just a little, consider subscribing. Now let us turn to the fourth fortress, the one we build with bricks of gold and mortar of fear. It is our possessions, our security. We live in a world that screams a single relentless message. You are what you have. Your worth is measured by your bank account, your home, your car, your assets. Security is a high wall built of material wealth. And so we strive, we accumulate, we hoard. We cling to our possessions our possessions, which were meant to be tools, become our masters. The fear of losing them becomes a constant, low, grade hum of anxiety beneath the surface of our lives. The pursuit of more becomes a treadmill that we can never get off. We are not owners, we are owned. Into this world of anxious accumulation walks a young man. He is a good man, he is righteous, he is respected. He has followed the commandments since he was a boy. He comes to Jesus and asks the ultimate question: what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus recites the commandments, and the young man confidently replies that he has kept them all. He has done everything right. He is in control of his righteousness. Jesus looks at him and loves him. And because he loves him, he is about to offer him the key to unlock his gilded cage. One thing you lack, Jesus says. He went away sad because he had great wealth. This is one of the most tragic moments in the Gospels. Jesus did not condemn him for being rich. He identified the one thing the man would not surrender. His wealth was not just his possession, it was his identity, his security, his God. The command to sell everything was an invitation to freedom. It was a call to trade the illusion of earthly security for the reality of heavenly treasure. He had to choose between his master, wealth, and the new master, Jesus. He could not serve both, and he walked away sad. His sadness is the profound sorrow of a man who sees the open door of his prison cell but cannot bring himself to walk through it because he has grown too comfortable with his chains. He chose to keep control over his possessions rather than surrender to the Lord of life. His fortress of wealth, which he thought was protecting him. The prophet Elijah arrives in a town in the midst of a terrible famine. God directs him to a widow, a woman at the absolute end of her resources. When Elijah asks her for water and a piece of bread, she replies with heartbreaking honesty, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son. No fortress, no security, no future beyond one last meal." Her control has been stripped away by circumstance. Elijah then makes a request that seems impossibly cruel. "First make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord..." To give away the final meal that stands between her son and starvation, based on the promise of a stranger. Her choice is not between great wealth and Jesus, but between certain death and a terrifying trust. And she does it. She makes the bread for Elijah first. It is an act of insane, beautiful surrender, and the promise is fulfilled. Her jar of flour was never empty. Her jug of oil never... The poor widow, in surrendering her last morsel, received an endless supply. Surrendering our possessions is not necessarily about selling everything we own. It is about a transformation of the heart. It is about breaking the power that our possessions have over us. It is the shift from owner to steward. It is holding everything with an open hand, recognizing that it is all a gift from God to be used for His purposes. It is finding our security. What is the possession, the asset, the security blanket that I refuse to let go of? The thing that, if Jesus asked for it, would make my face fall. That is where our true treasure lies. That is where our true master resides. To surrender our possessions is to demolish that fortress of fear and to build a new life on the foundation of God's faithfulness. It is to learn the secret of the widow, that the less we depend on our own finally, we arrive at the central keep, the very foundation upon which all the other fortresses are built. It is the fortress of pride. Pride is the mother of all control. It is the quiet, persistent whisper in our soul that says, "I can do this myself." It is the illusion of self-sufficiency. It is the belief that we are the masters of our own fate, the captains of our own soul. It is the original. Surrendering our future, our past, our relationships, and our possessions is impossible until we first surrender our pride. For as long as we believe we are ultimately in charge, we will never truly let go. There once was a king who was the embodiment of human pride. His name was Nebuchadnezzar. He was the ruler of Babylon, the greatest empire the world had ever seen. He was a man of immense power, a builder of. God gave him a dream, a warning of a great tree that reached to the heavens, providing shelter and food for all, which was then cut down. The prophet Daniel interpreted the dream. The tree was Nebuchadnezzar himself. He was being warned that if he did not humble himself and acknowledge that his kingdom was a gift from a higher power, he would be brought low. The king heard the warning, but he did not heed it. A year later, and the poison of pride filled his heart, he said, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power, and for the glory of my majesty?" The words were still on his lips when a voice from heaven spoke. The sentence was passed. His authority was taken from him. He was driven away from people and lived like a wild animal. His hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the... This was not merely a punishment. It was a severe mercy. It was a radical surgery to remove the cancer of pride. To find his true self, he had to be stripped of everything he thought defined him. His power, his reason, his majesty, his very humanity. He had to lose his mind to come to his senses. For 7 years he lived in this state. And then, at the end of that time, he did the one thing his pride had. In that upward glance was the act of surrender. It was the admission of his creatureliness, his dependence. It was the acknowledgement of a power higher than himself. And in that moment of humility, everything was given back to him. His sanity, his kingdom, his honor. But he was a changed man. His final decree is not one of pride, but of praise. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. He had to be broken to be made whole. He had to lose everything to understand who gives everything. Pride tells us that surrender is weakness. But the story of Nebuchadnezzar shows us that it is the only path to true strength. Consider a more intimate story of pride. The Apostle Peter, a man of great passion and impulsive declarations. When Jesus tells the disciple, "This shall never happen to you," he is trying to control the divine plan to impose his own idea of what the Messiah's journey should look like. Jesus' response is swift and sharp. "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Peter's pride, his human-centered view, was literally standing in the way of God's plan for salvation. Peter, in a burst of bravado, says, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus agrees. Peter gets out of the boat, and for a few moments he does the impossible. He walks on water. He is defying the laws of nature, sustained by his focus on Christ. But then he takes his eyes off Jesus. He looks at the wind and the waves. He sees the chaos of his circumstances. He remembers and he begins to sink. His prideful self-reliance is no match for the storm. In that moment of terror, as the water closes over him, he utters the most profound and honest prayer a human can pray. "Lord, save me." It is the death of pride. It is the cry of complete surrender immediately. Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him. True strength was not found in Peter's bold step out of the boat. It is the choice to say, "I don't know," instead of pretending we have all the answers. It is the humility to ask for help. It is the grace to admit when we are wrong. It is looking up to heaven, like Nebuchadnezzar, and acknowledging the source of all our blessings. It is crying out, "Lord, save me." When we feel ourselves sinking under the waves of our circumstances, it is the understanding that our greatest strength is the foundation of peace, because once we abdicate the throne of our own lives, we are no longer responsible for holding the universe together. God is, and He is far more capable than we are. We have walked the perimeter of our lives, visiting these 5 fortresses: the future, the past, our relationships, our possessions, and our pride. We see now that they are all interconnected, all built from the same. Let us return to the image we began with. You are hanging from that rope, your muscles screaming, your spirit exhausted. The call to surrender, to let go, still sounds like madness. But now you see things differently. The mist below is not an abyss. It is the loving hands of the Father. The fall is not a descent into chaos, but a release into His care. Letting go of your future is not abandoning your dreams. Letting go of your relationships is not ceasing to love. It is loving with a freedom that releases others to God's care. Letting go of your possessions is not a vow of poverty. It is the discovery of true wealth in the security of God's provision. And letting go of your pride is not self-hatred. It is the joyful embrace of your true identity as a beloved, dependent child of God. The grip of control offers only. The choice is yours, in this moment and in every moment that follows. Will you continue to hang on, exhausted and afraid, or will you take a breath, open your hands, and trust the one who promises to catch you? Surrender is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the real one. All right, that is it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and hitting the like button to show your support.